So I've heard you say many times that at Flagship Pioneering, you take a future backwards approach to innovation. You envision better futures, and then you work backwards from there to achieve what you want to achieve. So how is AI changing the way you think about future? What futures are you most excited about?
In a nutshell, I'll say that over time, what Flagship does, what I've been involved with, has taught me one thing, which is you can live your life thinking from the present forward, or you can live your life thinking from the future backwards. The advantage of present forward is that people think you're realistic, you're pragmatic, you're rational, you may even be an expert. There's no experts in the future, it turns out. There's only experts of the present. But if you're willing to think first about the future and then do things in the present that will achieve that future, you literally flip the time arrow. And I think with science, technology, and many other areas, leadership involves being able to think future backwards and tie it to the present reality. Because often, at least we find, it's daunting to think how are we going to overcome the major challenges of the world viewed from the present. But if you can just leap to a future state, imagine, get people collected around that future state, agree on what's worth building, then the road to that becomes pretty simple. You no longer have to fight over direction, you just have to fight over destination. So while I know that lots of people go around saying the destination is not important, it's really the journey, I think the destination is really important because it can actually inform, instruct, reinforce the journey. So that's what we mean. And AI, just to end, is a tool like none other to help you envision destinations, envision alternative paths to get to those destinations, and even prescribe and help you navigate the journey to those destinations. So I can't, since the 39 years since I got my PhD at MIT, I can't imagine a gift like AI for people like us, innovators, journeymen in life sciences, to be able to use to go further, faster, and have more impact. So this is really like, I feel 20 years younger as a result singularly of AI. All these people talk to me about longevity. As far as I'm concerned, using the tools of AI is a form of longevity if you can do a hell of a lot more in the time you've got left. So there you go.
Wow. I have to say, Noubar is on the board known as the corporation at MIT, and he is our board's optimist. And so I always come away invigorated from these conversations. And one thing that you've spoken a lot about, written about, is polyintelligence, the synthesis of human, machine, and nature's intelligence really is the next frontier. So how do you see these sort of polyintelligence systems shifting tools, mindsets, in how science is going to be done over the next decade?
Very much so. So Sally already revealed me as being an optimist. I go around saying that I'm a paranoid optimist. Yes. I'd invite you to think about yourself as a paranoid optimist. You can be as optimistic as you want, provided you're equally paranoid. I just came from another session where people were talking about skepticism about AI. And I also said to them, we should invite ourselves to be skeptical evangelists. As long as you can be an evangelist at the end of the day, be as skeptical as you want. But if you're just skeptical, especially about AI, and we'll come back to that, then you're like a film critic. It's really easy to criticize a film. Everybody can do it. It's really hard to make a film or make it better. So I would invite us to find a balance. Now, polyintelligence in a nutshell, those of you who are interested, is a term we coined a year ago to try to reveal that while humans are obsessively now engaging with artificial intelligence, something that we created, we've now made room in the language for another form of intelligence than our own. I think you'd agree with me that humans, having controlled language, also have controlled what gets to be intelligent. And for the longest time, until recently, we believed humans are the only intelligent beings on Earth. In fact, we made sure animals were not intelligent. I want to say parenthetically, those of you who are not following the field, that about 3 months ago, a pretty definitive paper came out demonstrating Bayesian reasoning in chimps, adjusting conditional action based on adjusted priors. I don't know if that's not a basis for intelligence, but I'm going to leave that aside. I think there is even neuronal intelligence in other animals. But in any case, we said there's human intelligence and now there's machine intelligence, AI. And what we pointed out from the life science world is that now that we've made room for one form of intelligence, how about we think of cells and everything in nature as forms of intelligence. Now, you might say, how could that be intelligence? It doesn't think like us. And of course, that would be human conceit. Because why does it have to think like us to be intelligent? If you think about intelligence as largely a form of reinforcement learning, whether it's done on GPUs or whether it's done in our neuronal circuits in our brains, or reinforcement learning in the form of DNA. What's the reinforcement learning in DNA? Darwinian evolution. That's all it is. It's coded in a substrate of DNA. It makes its own processor called a cell, and it embodies all of history's learnings up until that point and acts and adapts and continues to learn. If that's not intelligence, if a virus that can almost take down all of our immune systems is not intelligence, if a T cell that could find 2-3 cancer cells and kill them is not intelligence, I don't know what is. But what I just point out is what by polyintelligence we mean humans, machines, and nature coexisting as 3 forms of intelligence. And the punchline is, if we could use machine intelligence to emulate nature's intelligence in ways that we've never done before, and in ways that our brains cannot properly capture and process, I would argue, we may well have a chance in our lifetimes, very soon, to begin to talk about nature, the complexity of disease and preconditions and treatments in ways we have not had available for the entirety of the biotech pharmaceutical industry. So imagine a mechanism that involves 5,000 proteins interacting in hundreds of ways. Which paper are you going to describe that in? That's something that machine models can do just fine. And they may not be accurate in the beginning, but then give it time. So I would say at least a prediction for the future, and I'm hoping MIT leads the way in this regard, is humans deploying machine intelligence to reveal nature's intelligence for our benefit. The only thing is, what has to change is our belief that we're the supreme being and our belief that we need to understand everything in order to act on it, none of which is true. I don't understand how my iPhone does what it does, nor do I understand how the airplane does what it does, but boy, do I use it. I think you're going to see AI reveal all sorts of systems level information that we're going to act on. So with that said, let me flip over to asking Sally a question. MIT, Sally, does not have a medical school, but by any means with AI, it could certainly make massive medical inventions and advances. So how does AI change the way you're thinking about life science, biomedical science, and the practice of medicine altogether?
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that, as you point out, MIT doesn't have a medical school, yet we are surrounded by hospitals. And I think in the past, we did a lot of work where we were, pioneering in the fundamentals of AI or the fundamentals of quantum or the fundamentals of all sorts of areas of basic science. But the direct application to health was more difficult for us. And what we did in the past year with the help of, generous donors, Analog Devices, and others, is we've set up pilot programs now, for instance, with Mass General Brigham, where we have asked clinicians to help us to find what problems they are finding thorny, where the MIT AI expertise could actually be applied to solving real-world problems. And, we put out a call, and I think we got like 117 applications. I mean, this was a sort of latent need out there. I mean, there's sort of low-hanging fruit, which, as all of the imaging modalities are being profoundly affected by AI. We have folks like Regina Barsley who can now detect lung cancer, 6 years earlier using AI analysis of CT scans that were not evident to investigators. But there's a lot more that we're starting to think about. So, for example, Jim Collins and others thinking about one of the reasons that our lifespans are so long, as you know, from something like Moderna, is we can deal with infectious disease now in a way that was difficult. But we're starting to see a rise in antibiotic resistance. We're seeing fungi now with global warming becoming a pathogen that, pathogens that we have to worry about. And so using AI to think about how we improve on things like antibiotics, thinking about how we design new therapeutics, and also just thinking about how a patient's experience is different. How do we pioneer with hospitals to connect people to the right care? How do we mine the electronic health record to look for the harbingers of disease? Pancreatic cancer is a good example. So basically, we are continuing to innovate in AI, but rather than just pull the problems out of thin air, on the ground, we are making partnerships with the clinicians to really figure out where AI can help them and where innovation in AI can make a difference in their world.
Well, look, one other question I want to ask is, obviously, I mentioned earlier, universities have been in some ways in the crosshairs in many different settings, but in particular in the overall scientific enterprise. Some people question why anybody needs a college degree. You're seeing a lot of that coming out of Silicon Valley, and most recently, ideologically saying maybe college education isn't worth it. Lots of people. And then, of course, there's this notion that if AI is going to make all of us super geniuses, then like, why do we need to learn all these things? We could just kind of, press a button and get all this. So with that as noise, like the noise behind us, what's your vision of a modern university, a world-leading university, predicated on incorporating AI into the overall experience, but nevertheless creating generations yet of the leading thinkers, actors in the world?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'd say the major that is increasing the most in popularity at MIT is AI and decision making. So we want all of our students to have sort of a foundational facility with AI, but as you say, most of our students are not going to have to know what's under the hood in any great detail. So what we want them to know now is how they can really be passionate about the content that they care about, whether it's materials design, whether it's aerospace, whether it's biochemical innovation, and understanding the many ways in which AI can help in that innovation. The thing that we don't know yet is, first of all, how much do you have to have in your head to be creative versus how much you can sort of offload to AI? And how do we teach our students to prompt AI in the right way? So we all know that if you ask AI a question 3 different ways, you can get 3 different answers. And so we need to teach our students to be discerning consumers of AI. The other thing, though, is, as you know, MIT has its roots in, mens et manus, this really hands-on work. And I think where MIT can really play an important role is in physical intelligence. How do we really harness AI to do things physically for humanity that will, move forward our shared goals? And not, I don't like all this sort of fear-mongering all about replacing us. It's really, as you say, how do we use these tools to make our students be able to achieve much more in the future? And so our students are clearly all in on this. And, when I hear things about, students cheating, et cetera, I don't see that at MIT. I'm like, I don't know, go out and buy blue books. I mean, this is not a high-tech problem. What I really want them to be thinking about is how they can use AI to optimize their work. So I'm going to ask you the last thing, because I was mentioning to Noubar. So Noubar has this annual newsletter. And if any of you haven't seen his annual letter this year, it's been widely reported on. He describes the stark choice in the U.S. between enabling human-made miracles and risking regression if the scientific method is undermined. So how do you think about the U.S. long-term scientific investment? What do we risk in terms of just drifting or declining versus what we can do to ensure that we have a continued vibrant scientific future?
Okay, so thanks for the softball for me, because obviously this is very much top of mind for me. And let me make a case, and let me invite all of you who think likewise to raise your voice, not here, but outside of here. The point is the following. If you look at the environment we're in today, people are basically, with social media, questioning everything. That's great. Scientists question a lot of things, but they're doing so with no facts on the other side of the equation. And everywhere you look, you might be working on mRNA, you'll feel like, okay, that doesn't work. You might work on childhood vaccines, okay, that doesn't work. You might think any number of diseases, autism is caused by X, that turns out it is not. And so you find yourself as a scientist, no matter what you're working on, to be easily dismissed. So it occurred to me, and the point I make in this letter, if you look it up online with my name, it's called Choosing Science, is that for the first time in my history, 40 years of doing this kind of work, I feel like it's not scientific output that's being questioned, it's the scientific process that's being questioned. The scientific method that we've used basically over time since Enlightenment of evidence-based gathering evidence, debating evidence, determining the then objective truth, and then moving forward only to revisit it based on the same organized skepticism that defines science, is under attack. If you can engage in this dialogue, yeah, I mean, it's true. If you can engage in a dialogue where one side brings facts, by the way, facts from a community of people that don't believe they're facts and keep attacking them anyway. That's what we do among scientists, into an argument where the other side says, okay, that may be the facts, but here's my opinion. Now debate my opinion. I don't think that can happen in science. And what I warn my colleagues in the pharmaceutical industry is that they're all happy they don't work on mRNA, or they don't work on vaccines, or they don't work. But today's mRNA, today's vaccines, today's autism treatments are tomorrow's chemotherapy, tomorrow's T-cell approaches, tomorrow's gene editing. All of it is predicated on a process and engine of science, which is largely driven through academic, dedicated research, by the way, funded mostly, at least in the US, by the US government, in this 80-year-long incredible compact, started largely by a former MIT professor, Vannevar Bush, who put forward this whole idea through Endless Frontiers of a partnership. That partnership, in my view, for the first time, is under attack. What do we do as scientists? Well, as scientists, we tend to defend only our science, and we attack everybody else's science. We should be able to band together and defend the scientific method. There should be no debate that the scientific method is the best we have. If somebody has a better AI-moderated social discussions, whatever, let them put it forward as an alternative. Otherwise, if we all just accept this erosion of trust in science, then the next doctor's appointment you have, you might tell the doctor, you know, I know that's what you think, I should take a medicine for obesity, but I don't think so. And then question the science. So I just want us to kind of look at this and in your own way, raise your voice, particularly ask politicians that represent you to actually debate this openly. I'd love to hear people publicly debate why the scientific method is not the best tool humanity has, both to make progress and to discern the truth. So please take this into account.
So thank you as ever, Noubar. I have to say, if everybody goes out and has that conversation with 10 of their friends and ask them to have that conversation with 10 of their friends, this is an important dialogue that's not being had. And we at MIT think a lot about how we can articulate the value of science. And finally, I'll say, if the discovery of today doesn't happen, that pipeline will go dry. So ask your friends if they know anyone who has had immunotherapy for cancer, and tell them that started with immunology research 30 years ago. Ask them about any of the treatments that they're seeing in the clinic. Same story. And finally, I will say, we're always proud to have graduates like Noubar, and thank you so much.